Mainstream scientists don't like word apocalypse, global deluge, but can use huge catastrophe, magnetic reversal, extinction event, global drifting, glacial epochs, metallogenic epochs, Carboniferous periods, and the research is without problems. Scientific dissident want to say to you, all these events are formed by periodical global geological catastrophes. Twice in the Platonic year, asteroid or cometary impact. Man-made impact or extreme lunar perigee causes destruction of the balance between the powerful pressure forces around the solid mantle layers. Please forgive me, dear scientists, I'll use apocalypse, after last apocalypse, in 10,465 BC, center of the planetary empire. 10 Atlantis isles have been sunken within Atlantis Tripoli Junction Zone. Only the Atlantis high mountains did not sunk fully, producing the Azores archipelago. Unfortunately, the early developed race of Atlanteans could discover the own assimilation mechanism. They have been dispersed all around the world as the farmers, priests, rulers and gods. After losing the motherland Atlantis, by the last apocalypse in 10,465 BC, they were simply doomed to assimilation. They were scattered all around the earth. They loved the power of primitive society, and their life together was almost impossible. After the apocalypse, all regional, or early colonies all around the earth became free temporarily. The survived Atlanteans have been dispersed in the free colonies. All survived military and civil crafts have been captured by potentate from Elephant City, Delhi. In post-flood boundary free Egypt began ruling first independent pre-dynastic Pharaoh Hermes I. We have lots of evidences about the first ruler dynasty of the independent Egypt. They were dynasty of Hermeses by the post-flood boundary. Falsifiers of the history and Egyptology most majestic Pharaoh of the post-flood boundary. Atlantean Hermes II have mixed with Ramses II. So they have stolen more than 9,000 years from the history. Our main goal, to return Atlantis in the history of mankind. The human brain is capable to break any artificial barriers around secrets and mysteries. Maybe in the Abbasid dynastic pharaohs restored something. It does not mean that the amazing post-flood boundary complex built by the dynastic pharaohs. We are now in a curious impasse of historical and other sciences. So this is not strange. There is no proof about Ramses II in Abbasid. This is the usual curious in our fake scientific epic, but it's a fact. The Abbasid car touches vividly show that the construction is started by the pre-dynastic pharaoh, Hermes I. Modern appearance of Abbasid complex was made by the third independent pharaoh, Hermes III. Hermes III introduced changes in the cell's interior and exterior design. Everything is written in the walls, but we have to read correctly the cartouches. According to the cartouches, Hermes first began its construction after the global deluge in 10,465 BC. He was still young and did not have the status of the majestic god and the supreme priest. Cartouche gives conclusive evidence. Young Pharaoh Hermes I had to subdue some recalcitrant rulers. He eventually became a full-fledged potentate of the vast territory. From the southern borders of tributaries to the Nile's delta, King Hermes I and his queen were greystone cartouches by the famous pair of symbols. Hobby above the semicircle indicates Lower Egypt, modern Egypt and northern Sudan. B above the semicircle indicates Upper Egypt, i.e., Ancient Ethiopia. Modern Egypt is the only part of Lower Egypt from the Hermes epoch. Abyssinia, which at the time Hermes was inseparable part of the Lower Egypt, now situates in Sudan. We have irrefutable proof, because of onslaught of the Negro tribes from the south. The southern border of Lower Egypt was constantly moving to the north. Now modern Egypt is the only part of the Lower Egypt era Hermeses. As for the ancient honey country, Ethiopia, these areas mainly are now divided between Sudan, Somalia, Eritrea, Kenya and Uganda. Ethiopia itself is only a small part of the Upper Egypt, the country honey. Ethio in Coptic has meaning of honey. The Egyptian priests had known better than our scientists know. The dates of the independent origin in the post-flood Egypt, 21, 22 and 23 October were considered equal. In Abbas and Belly's written the independent origin in the post-flood Egypt. For 4 years, once in a year, one of these days, a ray of sunshine reaches deep to the wall of the main temple in Abbas and Bal where sits the Pharaoh of the independent post-flood Egypt. In October, on one of these days the sun has always alignment at sunrise over the causeway. Causeway is the megalithic road on the Giza Plateau, from the average pyramid to the Sphinx. Thus sunrise on Giza Plateau confirms the date of birth of the post-flood Egyptian kingdom. In late October as recorded in Abbas and Bel, on the Giza Plateau, we have an amazing complex dedicated to victims of the apocalypse and lots of souls of the dead. In the post-flood project by Thrive's greatest Hermes Sphinx had its own name, Horus on the horizon. We have evidences that the Sphinx had the head of Horus, in the original form. One of the evidences is on the dream stela between the Sphinx pods. In the hieroglyphic text Horus on the horizon, Sphinx by plain text, speaks, to young prince, I'm Horus. It's unbelievable, but there are indirect evidences by official Egyptologists. The main falsifier of the Egyptology and history of the mankind, Mark Lerner, who has long studied the Sphinx for decades, came to the conclusion that Sphinx is interrelated to both character Pharaoh as well as God. You will not believe it, but this nomination is perfectly great for the Horus. He was greatest Pharaoh and God of the ancient Egyptians, Atlanto-Hamitic people. Another indirect proof is the assertion by official Egyptologists that the Sphinx considered in Egypt as the sun god. Sphinx worshipped in Egypt as the greatest sun god Horus. Official Egyptologists are also well informed that the Sphinx is the Horus on the horizon. Atlantean scientists and engineers had known what proportion is lion. Atlanto-Hamitic builders also had no shortage of stone. The Coptic Aborigines of Egypt are the assimilated generation of the Atlanto-Hamitic people. The elongated shape of Sphinx and the huge traces of water erosion on its walls for smart people is the clear evidence that the Sphinx was created long before the Dry Dynastic era. The post-flood rains not only destroyed the walls around the Sphinx. During the post-flood wet air rains could destroy a huge limestone body of the epical lion. Scientists have found many traces of the restoration workings on the epical lion. Limestone body of the epical lion had been demolished easily by post-flood rains. We have conclusive evidence the body was multiply-aligned. Restoration of the body was too difficult, aligning and hewing much easier. Because of the multiple repairs, epical lion completely lost the original aspect ratio. The Sphinx did not lose stone original length. Additional new pieces of limestone and clay mortar were fixed to multiply, restoring long Recovery of the body's volume in such a way was very time-consuming work for the working staff of the dynastic pharaohs. Hewing and aligning of the ease of processing limestone rocks was much easier. For millenniums, these primitive restorations have formed the modern form of an elongated and disproportionate epical lion. Old images on the head of the Sphinx clearly show many small bands of the wind erosion. This is a clear evidence for the intelligent people that the head was renewing in the dynastic era. The primitive restorations rejuvenated the epical lion nearly 8,000 years. For the last 4 millenniums the head had no sign of the wavy profile made by the rain erosions, which confirms that the head of Sphinx was restored cut in the dry dynastic era. We have evidence that the head of Sphinx was restored cut by Pharaoh known as Khufu. Proof about Khufu's restoration is announced as a falsification by official Egyptologists. Pharaoh Enoch or Hermes II was the second independent ruler in the post-flood Egypt. He was ruling very difficult time in Egypt after the apocalypse in 10,465 BC. We know his other nicknames as well: Mercurius Maximus, Hermes Trismegistus, thrice greatest Hermes. Now we can read his famous cartouche, His Excellency, Pharaoh of Egypt, owner of the lands, seas and throne, second majestic god and supreme priest, creator majestic offerings in honor of the gods, and to lots of souls of dead. Hermes thrice greatest. Name Hermes is formed from the ancient word Hermes. Hermes into Atlantean language had only explanation Goram S.I.E. Goram means priest. And Us is a well-known name for the specialists and has the meaning of the god. Thus Atlanteans in Egypt understood as the majestic god and supreme priest. Goram as can be explanated as a Goram priest, as a god. I'll use Hermes. Hermes for the Egyptian Aborigines had a different meaning. Egyptian Aborigines understood as a living embodiment of god Horus, i.e., Horus Mesat, the born god Horus. Into Coptic language Mesat means born. Giza complex was built by technical and intellectual forces of all the surviving aerials of Atlantis. The Giza complex had been written tragic, date of the apocalypse 10,465 BC. 3 majestic pyramids are a mirror image of the Orion's belt on the Giza plateau in 10,465 BC, when the sun appeared on the horizon. In late October near the constellation Leo in the beginning of apocalypses, Sphinx indicates epoch of the apocalypse in the Leo's astronomical era. The megalithic road from the middle pyramid to the Sphinx indicates sunrise in the beginning of apocalypse in late October. The sun periodically is aligned over the megalithic road 21, 22 or 23 October. This is interrelated to Julian year, 365.25 days. Atlantis had been destroyed after the powerful nuclear explosion. Nuclear explosion happened at a nuclear power plant 12,477 years ago, during the 3 days 21, 22 and 23 October, with continuing strong global earthquakes and tremendous deformations of the crust. Such global deformations all around the Earth spawned the powerful periodical tsunamis of 100 meters to kilometers. The mainstream scientists want to forget the groundbreaking research on nuclear catastrophe. The research gives conclusive evidence nuclear catastrophe approximately 12,500 years ago The enormous energy released by the catastrophe at 12,477 years ago could have heated the atmosphere to over 1,000 degrees Celsius over Michigan. The overall pattern of the catastrophe matches the pattern of mass extinction before Holocene times. The Western Hemisphere was more affected than the Eastern, North America more affected than South America, Eastern North America more affected than Western North America. Scientists were thinking they found Chirac the supernova explosion 12,500 years ago. In reality, they found the huge nuclear track of the huge nuclear catastrophe in 12,477 years ago. Whatever it was, the nuclear catastrophe 12,500 years ago. The nuclear track was much larger by standards of all suspected cosmic occurrences. Thus, scientific dissidents have huge conclusive evidence which proved by independent researchers. Groundbreaking conclusion is that the nuclear catastrophe happened within Northern Hemisphere. The powerful nuclear catastrophe happened near the shores of the Eastern North America. In reality, we have conclusive evidence nuclear catastrophe happened within the pre-flood Passadia. We have the additional conclusive evidences about rejuvenated ancient nuclear explosions. By the post-flood boundary, nuclear explosion happened in Harappa, Mohenjo-daro and Parisburg. Thus we have some conclusive evidences, strong scientific proofs about the Atlantis destruction. A previous cycle of civilization had been destroyed after the powerful nuclear explosion. I'm sure dangerous nuclear explosion happened at a nuclear power plant. Controlled nuclear reactions have developed into the uncontrolled nuclear reactions. The powerful nuclear explosion destroyed balance of the huge tectonic pressure forces around the solid mantle layers and created the last bloody apocalypse. Global drifting of the continents over the 1,500 kilometers produced global changing of the shores all around the Earth. Pre-flood northern geographical pole from the middle of the Greenland had been shifted about 15 degrees, approximately 1,500 kilometers. There are lots of pre-flood Atlantean pyramids all around the world. The 7-step pre-flood pyramids are sacred, the 7th epical heliacal rise of the star Sirius. After the powerful Aquarius global deluge that happened in 22,440 BC, the 7-step pyramid on the Bali was built by the regional Atlanteans, a rival aristocracy. The 7-step so-called Mayan pyramid is interrelated to terrestrial Atlanteans rulers as well. The 7-step Cambodian pyramid Khakar has same builders. The Cambodia genetic researches gives conclusive evidence about builders' early developed race. We have an amazing genetic abundance of the early developed European tribes in the Cambodia. The 7-step pyramid by Gulf of Mexico was built by pre-flood Atlantean aristocracy as well. Before the Atlantis destruction, whole pre-flood world was divided as influential zones between the 10 Atlantis kingdoms. Atlanteans believed that the souls in the pyramids can become gods. The original translation of Teotihuacan correctly would be as the place where soul transformed into a god. The same can be said about all pre-flood and post-flood pyramids in the world. Pre-flood pyramids have geographical orientation to the pre-flood geographical pole in Greenland. Post-flood pyramids have the geographical orientations to the modern geographical poles. The Giza complex is built by the post-flood boundary of 10,465 BC to 10,400 BC. Of course, the amazing and majestic Giza complex has modern geographical orientation. Scientific falsifications are the dangerous treason and produce deep deadfall crises and criminalize. We have many groundbreaking discoveries for the official Egyptologists. Cartouches of the Hermes Trismegistus vividly show who was creator of the majestic Giza complex. Hermes Trismegistus on the Giza plateau deified uncountable Atlantean souls of the departed. All in all, primitive aborigines all around the world believed giant Atlanteans were gods. Normal growth for an individual from Atlantis was about 2.5 meters. Nobody would create so huge sarcophagi for the Aborigines. 1.7 to 1.8 growth. Some natural Atlantean males reached up to 2.8 meters and a slightly higher. Sometimes assimilated Atlantean genes can explode to show us conclusive evidence. About disappeared our left-handed giants in our genes thousands of years ago. Stadnik and other modern giants are the living embodiment of our assimilated Atlanteans in our genes. We have groundbreaking discovery for mainstream scientists on our Atlantean giant ancestors. Traditionally, the mainstreamers have met the groundbreaking discovery by ostrich position. In the Caucasus Mountains by Margiani had been discovered giant bones of the Atlantean ancestors. Georgian investigators have announced from a well-known growth of giants of 2.5 to 3 meters. These early developed giants were living and hunting in the high mountains 25,000 years ago. They would be very developed hunter people to live in the high mountains by this time. Even Forrester from Margiani knows that, but our mainstream scientists do not want to know. Scientific dissidents have conclusive evidence by genetic researchers and proof on genetic branch. Genetic researchers proved that the Caucasus was motherland for the L1A tribe 25,000 years ago. Thus early developed European tribe of giants were descendants of man 17 and had R1A1A branch. Abundance of this genes in the Cambodia vividly show on majestic builders of the megalith artifact. Angkor Wat has the Giza complex age around 10,400 BC. And sacred three last global deluges. The epical deluge data of the Leo, Aquarius and Cancer are interrelated to precessional angles. The majestic complex of the Giza Plateau was sacred for the Atlanteans' victims. This is the greatest memorial of the Atlantis civilization and bloody apocalypse in 10,465 BC. Assimilated Atlanteans were constructing many temples and pyramids in the world. After the apocalypse, the megalithic stones of the many pre-flood and post-flood temples and pyramids all around the world mainly have been dismantled long ago for the other constructions. Lots of amazing pre-flood megalithic artifacts, treasures and buildings still lies beneath the water. Thrice majestic Hermes sent to us an amazing magnificent message about the greatest tragedy. But we do not want to understand. We are trying to repeat mistakes of the ancients. We have come up with thousands of primitive tales about the complex of Giza and about Atlantis. On the Giza plateau is written only a single encrypted key. Majestic truth about the terrible death which is the Alpha-Omega boundary. The causeway has only real meaning. The way is dedicated to greatest and tragic cause. The Alpha-Omega way has the same meaning and shows astronomical bloody boundary. Next proofs you can see in the next clips and in the links under the clips of the YouTubes or